Tommy Morrison had it all: looks, devastating power, and fame.
I'm Tommy the Duke Morrison, a heavyweight with 24 knockouts, and I'm going to the top.
He even fought legends like Foreman and starred in Rocky V. But despite being boxing's golden boy, behind the Duke was a dark spiral that ruined everything. Addiction, denial, crimes. How did a boxer who hit such highs fall to such lows, only to have his life cut short at just 44 years old? Let's break it all down. Tommy Morrison started fighting as a child, displaying an early hunger for combat that would define his entire existence. At 13, he was sneaking into toughman contests using a fake ID, trading punches with grown men and winning 14 out of 15 times. His raw power, his grit, his hunger, it was all there, fully formed before he even hit high school. That early ferocity carried into the amateurs. Morrison dominated local circuits and won the prestigious Western Olympic trials in 1988. He was a top U.S. prospect until controversial split decision loss to future gold medalist Ray Mercer crushed his Olympic dreams. But instead of breaking him, it lit a fire. Then came the pro circuit, and Morrison tore through it like a wrecking ball. 28 straight wins, knockout after knockout.
I can't believe that Smoger is actually letting him get away with this. That's it. That's it.
His destructive power became legendary throughout the boxing world, especially his explosive left hook that could end fights in an instant. He wasn't just winning, he was obliterating people.
I think Tommy is on his way. He's still learning, but he's improving from fight to fight.
Opponents feared facing him because of his combination of technical skill and devastating punching power. And in 1993, he reached the summit. A unanimous decision win over the legendary George Foreman to claim the WBO heavyweight title.
That Tommy Morrison has done his job.
This victory put him on top of the boxing world. Overnight, Morrison became a boxing superstar, but it didn't stop there. Hollywood wanted in. Sylvester Stallone handpicked him to play Tommy the Machine Gun in Rocky V, giving him a co-starring role alongside one of cinema's biggest action stars. He wasn't just a fighter anymore. He was a household name, an icon. He had money, he had charm, and the cameras loved him. Promoters dubbed him the Great White Hope, a crossover megastar who could revive American heavyweight boxing. But here's the thing, success didn't save Tommy Morrison. It triggered something dark and destructive. Behind the magazine covers and movie roles was a man spiraling. His newfound celebrity status created what sources described as a limitless appetite for parties, liquor, and sex. One source said it flat out. He was out of control. Fame didn't fix him. It poured gasoline on every vice he had. The more he got, the faster he fell. Morrison's life followed a brutal pattern. Every rise was chased by an even steeper fall. After capturing the heavyweight title, his career looked unstoppable. Until it wasn't. In 1993, just months after beating George Foreman, he suffered a shocking knockout loss to Michael Bent. It wasn't just a setback, it was a collapse. That single defeat cost him a payday against Lennox Lewis that could have made him one of the highest-paid fighters on the planet. And just like that, the momentum was gone. He tried to claw his way back, but something darker was already waiting in the shadows. In February 1996, as he prepared for what was supposed to be his comeback fight, Morrison underwent a routine pre-fight blood test. What came back wasn't a fight cancellation, it was a death sentence. He had tested positive for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. The fallout was immediate and unforgiving. The diagnosis immediately and permanently ended his professional boxing career.
I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. Out in the open, can get just one person out there to take a more responsible attitude towards sex, then I feel I would have scored my biggest knockout ever.
Nevada's athletic commission yanked his license, and every major commission in the country followed suit. No appeals, no exceptions, no more fights. His career wasn't just over, it was erased. At a tearful press conference, Morrison faced the cameras and admitted his truth. He blamed his permissive, fast, and reckless lifestyle. He promised he'd never fight again.
I didn't do the right things. I led a very reckless lifestyle. Even though my career's over, I hope that in some way, shape, or form I can continue to step up and find a new, better way to educate people.
For a brief moment, it looked like he was facing his demons head-on. He even linked up with Magic Johnson to raise awareness about HIV, seemingly ready to use his platform for good. For the first time in a long time, Tommy Morrison looked like he might actually grow up, but it didn't last. Just weeks later, he made a complete U-turn. He quit taking his medication after just 30 days. He called it medical propaganda, then launched into full-blown denial. And from there, the spiral became unstoppable. This wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was the start of what one insider called a deep and intractable pattern of denial, a delusion that would define the rest of his life and ultimately end it. Soon, Morrison's denial wasn't just personal, it was public. He began claiming his original HIV test was false, insisting he had never actually contracted the virus despite multiple tests, and it didn't stop there. He started pushing dangerous conspiracy theories, claiming his diagnosis was orchestrated by a rival boxing promoter seeking to destroy his career, or even by government agencies working against him. His longtime promoter Tony Holden watched the spiral firsthand. He said Morrison became obsessed with fringe internet forums, buried in pseudoscience and paranoia. The more he searched, the deeper he fell. And denial came with a cost. The diagnosis didn't just strip him of his career, it ripped away the structure that had kept him afloat. The gym, the training camps, the discipline. Without boxing, Tommy Morrison had no anchor, and the result was predictable. He fell back into the same chaos that may have gotten him infected in the first place. His life quickly became what one source described as a shambles. No goals, no routine, no boundaries. And the truth is, this wasn't new behavior. Even before the diagnosis, Morrison had shown a troubling pattern of legal problems and self-destruction. Back in 1993, the same year he beat Foreman and became champion, he pleaded guilty to assaulting a college student. He also racked up public intoxication charges. While the cameras showed a rising star, the police reports told a different story. One of a man with a short fuse, a drinking problem, and a growing disregard for the law. After his boxing ban effectively ended his professional career, things got much worse. His legal troubles intensified, and his name began popping up in the news. But now, it was on police blotters, not fight cards. He was arrested repeatedly for driving under the influence across multiple states. And it didn't stop at alcohol. There were drug charges, weapons violations, dangerous stunts that put himself and others in serious danger. The Tommy Morrison that once electrified boxing was gone. In his place was a man spiraling deeper and deeper into chaos, dragging his legacy down with him. And just when you thought he couldn't fall any further, he did. By 1997, Morrison's free fall was no longer just sad, it was dangerous. That year, he was convicted of a DUI and other serious charges in Delaware County, Oklahoma, after a traffic accident that left 3 innocent people injured. This wasn't some tabloid scandal. This was real harm to real people. The court ordered him to attend a treatment facility, recognizing that his problems went beyond simple criminal behavior. But accountability didn't stick. That same year, Morrison faced separate DUI and speeding charges in Kansas. Somehow he walked away without serving time, thanks to legal technicalities and a good lawyer. But the message was clear. Even the justice system couldn't get through to him. And it didn't stop there. The destructive pattern continued throughout the 90s, and in July 1998, Morrison was arrested again, this time in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, for drunk driving and multiple other traffic violations. He was handed probation and a $2,200 fine he could barely afford. Not exactly a wake-up call. In fact, his Tulsa case was officially logged as his first true DUI conviction. The others, technically labeled driving while impaired. But that distinction meant nothing to the people whose lives he put at risk. Then came 1999, and the spiral went into overdrive. In September, Morrison was pulled over in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Police found cocaine, marijuana, and a loaded gun in his car. Just days earlier, he had been given a suspended sentence for his Tulsa case, a second chance, and he lit it on fire. That arrest proved one thing beyond doubt. Tommy Morrison wasn't just reckless, he was incapable of change. And by Thanksgiving of 1999, Tommy Morrison was crashing headfirst. That day, he was arrested yet again in Madison County, Arkansas, facing multiple serious complaints. The list of charges read like a rap sheet gone wild. Public intoxication, marijuana possession, criminal impersonation, and illegally concealing a weapon. But this wasn't just about bad behavior. It was about escalation. Because that gun charge was tied directly to his status as a convicted felon. And that made it a big deal. No more slaps on the wrist, no more technicalities. This time, it was serious. With multiple arrests piling up in quick succession, Morrison's bond was revoked on the spot. The former heavyweight champ was officially behind bars, waiting for a trial that would decide just how far he'd fallen. In January 2000, the verdict came down. He pleaded guilty to 2 drug charges from his September arrest in Fayetteville. The judge handed him a 10-year sentence but suspended 8 of them. Instead, Morrison was sent to the Southwest Arkansas Community Correction Center in Texarkana for a 2-year stint, a shot at rehabilitation. He served most of that sentence with good behavior and was granted parole in February 2001. For a brief moment, it looked like he might finally slow down, but he couldn't help himself. Just 1 year later, in April 2002, a Tulsa County judge sentenced him to another year in jail, this time for violating probation from a previous drunk driving case. Technically, he didn't serve new time. He got credit for what he'd already done in Arkansas, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. Even after prison, Tommy Morrison still couldn't follow the most basic rules. Every now and then, he would break character. He'd admit the truth, if only for a moment. "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life," he once said. And he wasn't wrong. But recognition never turned into redemption. The pattern never changed. If anything, it got worse. When we talk about his brutal crimes, we're not talking about some hidden scandal or explosive criminal conspiracy. His brutality was slower, cumulative, self-inflicted, and socially dangerous. Over the years, he racked up multiple DUIs, was caught with illegal drugs and weapons, posing significant and ongoing threats to public safety. His most notorious incident left 3 innocent people hospitalized after a drunk driving crash, proof that his recklessness had real-world consequences. His drug use wasn't just whispered about either. According to multiple sources, Morrison was deep into cocaine and crystal meth, substances that fed the chaos and likely blocked any chance at meaningful change. Some reports even tossed around allegations of adultery, hinting at a broader moral unraveling. But unlike his criminal record, those stories remain unconfirmed. They were part of the swirling mess around his name, but not central to what truly defined his downfall. Because when you strip away the rumors and drama, his real crime was the life he refused to save. A man with talent, fame, and every opportunity to get help, who instead chose denial, destruction, and ultimately, a slow suicide in plain sight. Despite every red flag and a career-ending diagnosis that had been medically confirmed, Tommy Morrison still wasn't done with boxing. In the mid-2000s, years after Nevada and nearly every other state had revoked his license, he attempted an ill-advised comeback, recklessly putting himself and his opponents at risk. He somehow passed medical screenings in Arizona and managed to fight twice more. But those comebacks weren't really about competition. They were about validation. Morrison was desperate to prove he didn't have HIV. So desperate, in fact, that he invited the New York Times, yes, the New York Times, to oversee a medical test in 2007. Alongside that, he underwent 2 additional tests through a West Virginia sports authority. All 3 seemed to support his claim that he was HIV negative. But here's where it gets murky. Fast. Questions emerged immediately about the validity of the blood samples. Medical experts noted serious doubts about whether the samples even came from Morrison at all. His former agent, Randy Lang, flat out accused him of tampering with the results. He even claimed he had tested positive as recently as January 2007, and ringside physicians weren't buying it either. They pointed right back to the original 1996 tests, verified by multiple labs and confirmed by a pathologist. Those weren't false positives, they were hard medical facts, so why couldn't Morrison accept it? Part of the answer may lie in the intense stigma that came with his diagnosis. In interviews, Tommy talked openly about the isolation he felt. Friends avoided him. Gyms didn't want him around. Some people were so misinformed, they believed they could get HIV just by sweating near him. It was fear, pure, ignorant fear. And that fear, the way it warped how people treated him, may have fed his delusion. Deep down, maybe he needed to believe the tests were wrong. Maybe that was easier than accepting the truth. Even Magic Johnson, who had lived publicly with HIV for years, tried to step in. He encouraged Morrison to take the diagnosis seriously, to follow his doctor's orders, to take the medication that was keeping him alive. But Tommy refused, a critical and ultimately fatal error. By 2011, his denial had gone from personal to dangerous. He was telling reporters and anyone else who'd listen that HIV didn't exist, that no one had it, that it was all a lie. And with that, Tommy Morrison went from tragic figure to a potential threat, not just to himself, but to the people around him. It wasn't just denial anymore, it was delusion. And it would cost him everything. Just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. In the early 2000s, during one of the darkest stretches of his life, Morrison met Trisha Harding, the woman who would eventually become his wife. But instead of helping pull him out of the spiral, her presence seemed to accelerate it. According to multiple reports, his behavior shifted drastically after their relationship began, very differently, and not for good reasons, as one insider put it. Trisha fed into the fantasy. She publicly claimed that Morrison didn't have HIV at all. In her words, he was suffering from Guillain-Barré syndrome. It was a convenient narrative, and a dangerous one. By this point, he had completely abandoned his HIV treatment. No more antiretrovirals, no more doctors, just drugs, lots of them. He was reportedly using cocaine and crystal meth regularly, and it showed. His health began to collapse under the weight of his choices. What followed was a vicious cycle. Denial fed into drug use, which weakened his immune system, which made him sicker, further convincing him that something else must be wrong. The truth wasn't just avoided, it was erased. But this wasn't just his own personal delusion anymore. He still had a platform. People still listened, and that made his denialism a public threat. His claims that HIV didn't exist, that it was all a scam, could influence others, especially those newly diagnosed and scared. Even with overwhelming scientific evidence and direct intervention from Magic Johnson, someone who had lived with HIV for decades, Morrison refused to listen. He rejected every opportunity to survive. At this point, the story had stopped being sad. It had become maddening, because his fate wasn't sealed by the virus. It was sealed by his refusal to treat it. He directly accelerated his own physical decline and ultimately guaranteed his premature death. From 2001 onward, those close to him began noticing the change. His body was breaking down, slowly at first, then rapidly. By 2012, after a mysterious chest surgery, things took a dramatic turn. In his final year, he was bedridden. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. A ventilator did his breathing for him. This once chiseled athlete, once the face of American heavyweight hope, had become unrecognizable. By age 40, people said he looked 60. A walking cautionary tale, aged by denial, addiction, and years of damage that couldn't be undone. Tommy Morrison died on September 1st, 2013, in a hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. He was just 44 years old. The official cause? Cardiac arrest brought on by multiple organ failure, septic shock, and a severe bacterial infection known as Pseudomonas aeruginosa septicemia. an infection typically seen in people with severely compromised immune systems. But here's where the story turns from tragedy to controversy. His death certificate made no mention of HIV, no mention of AIDS, nothing. That deliberate omission poured gasoline on the fire of public speculation. To many, it was the final chapter in a life defined by denial. Even in death, the narrative was being controlled. Yet the medical facts paint a different picture. Pseudomonas aeruginosa septicemia is a serious opportunistic infection, and one that, according to medical literature, most commonly affects individuals with advanced AIDS. The omission wasn't proof of innocence. It was a cover, a final attempt to erase the truth that Morrison had refused to accept for nearly 2 decades. And the denial didn't just come from paperwork. His wife, Tricia, continued to publicly claim that he had Guillain-Barré syndrome. She insisted HIV had nothing to do with his death. But Morrison's mother told a different story. In a heartbreaking interview with ESPN, she said plainly, "My son died of full-blown AIDS." 2 versions of reality. One shaped by love, loyalty, and delusion. The other grounded in grief and truth. And the ambiguity didn't end there. No autopsy was performed. His body was cremated quickly after his death. That meant no definitive medical confirmation, no way to silence the conspiracy theories, no way to rewrite the ending. And maybe that's the most fitting part of all this. Tommy Morrison spent the last years of his life running from reality, denying science, ignoring every warning, refusing every opportunity to take control of his fate. And when the final bell rang, he left behind a story just as chaotic, contradictory, and tragic as the life he lived. His death certificate, while medically accurate on the surface, told only half the story. Yes, he died of cardiac arrest, multiple organ failure, and a severe bacterial infection. But it left out the most crucial detail, the compromised immune system that made all of it possible. It was a final act of avoidance, one that mirrors Morrison's own refusal to accept reality. Medical experts agree, Pseudomonas aeruginosa septicemia doesn't just appear in healthy people. It preys on the immunodeficient, and in Morrison's case, that almost certainly meant AIDS. By choosing cremation and denying an autopsy, the family ensured that no definitive medical conclusion could ever be reached. No official record, no final reckoning. Just more silence, more speculation, more of the same carefully maintained illusion that had shaped the last decade of his life. And that's the bitter irony. After years of fighting the truth, Morrison's death certificate became his final weapon in that war, a document that, like its subject, refused to face what really happened. Tommy Morrison's story began like a movie script. Small-town kid with big dreams, knockout power, and matinee idol looks. He had the title. He had the fame. He even had a role in Rocky. He was on top of the world. But in 1996, his HIV diagnosis marked the beginning of a long, brutal downfall, one fueled by addiction, denial, and self-destruction. His arrest record, his drug abuse, and his reckless behavior didn't just damage his career, they put lives at risk. They showed a man unraveling in public view with no one strong enough or close enough to pull him back. His brutal crimes weren't bloody headlines. They were slow-motion tragedies, crimes of neglect, crimes of denial, and in the end, crimes that killed him. Because Morrison didn't just reject treatment, he rejected the very idea that he needed it. And it cost him everything at just 44 years old. Officially, it wasn't AIDS. But anyone who followed his life and understood the facts knows what really happened. Morrison's legacy is complicated. He was a gifted fighter, an American star, and a man who once seemed destined for greatness. But his story serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked personal demons, the powerful grip of addiction, and the dangerous allure of denial when faced with scientific truth. His life remains a poignant example of a duke who, in the end, lost the most important fight of all, the one against himself. But what do you think? Was Tommy Morrison a victim of stigma and bad advice? Or was he fully responsible for the path he chose? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who thinks boxing is just about what happens in the ring. Because sometimes the real fight starts after the final bell. See you in the next one.